All right, this is it, the last talk of the event. So I'm kind of doing double duty here. I'm sharing with you I'm going to take you through some things we've learned from time logs about how to free up time, your time, and maybe the people you work with, some of their time. And then I'll do very quickly the wrap up. We'll be done by 4:10 p.m. Eastern time. So again, thank you for joining us during this event. It's been great having you here. Some really great questions and comments, and in the clinics, some great discussion as well. So thanks. All right, here's the topic. Free up 5 to 10 hours per week, lessons from time tracking logs. Now, I have a very firm belief that as lean practitioners, our job is to create flow efficiency. It's to make the work flow across the different silos. It gets hung up between the silos. And one of the reasons it gets hung up between the silos is often, most of the time, most places, people that work on a silo or an island can only see their own silo or island, and they optimize it and optimize it and optimize it. But that doesn't make the work flow across the silos any better. So there's this concept of resource efficiency, which is let's make the resource, the person efficient, and then there's let's make the whole process efficient by making the work flow across all of the steps as easily as possible. So while I'm talking about trying to make ourselves more maybe efficient and freeing up our own time, I'm not doing that at the expense of creating flow across the silos. Rather, sometimes people are just so overwhelmed that they can't even join you for an afternoon of a workshop to solve the problems that are making them so overwhelmed. So this is kind of like, there's some things we've learned from working with people at all kinds of levels, individual teams, intact teams, people from the team level, people from middle management, and even senior executive. One hint is that the higher you go, the more control you tend to have over your time. You tend to have more control over the types of meetings you go to and that sort of thing. But anyways, over the last decade, we've been doing some training and workshops with teams where they log their time and they see where they actually spend their time, and then they analyze it. And using a lot of lean principles, they analyze how they spend their time. And what I'm going to share with you in this little talk is just some lessons we've learned from those exercises, so that you have a few takeaways and hopefully some things that you can do right away to free up your time if you find that you're just so busy you can't resurface for air. So it's kind of like this. This is something that, in terms of people who are change agents, this is sort of how I think about it. When you get on the plane, they ask you, but they give you the instructions in case of depressurization, your mask will fall from the ceiling. Always put on your own mask before helping another person. And I hope that this can contribute a little bit to this concept that you as change agents need to take care of yourselves a little before you can help others. There may also be some things here that you can mentor or coach some of the people you work with on this as well. Okay, so time logging. Why are we talking about logging your time in an Excel spreadsheet? That's kind of crazy, isn't it? What about Copilot? So you can go to Copilot and it'll give you some analysis. If you have the enterprise model, you could say, tell me how I spent my time in the last 2 weeks and give me some ideas about whether I'm being efficient and effective with my time. And that's helpful. That's interesting and it's useful. The problem with using Copilot is, as good as a tool it is for certain things, the only thing that Copilot really goes off of is how your time is scheduled in your calendar. It doesn't say how you actually spent your time, how you spent your time in the meeting, how you spent your time outside of meetings, the time that isn't scheduled. So Copilot can't really help you out with that. All it can really help you out with is how does it look like? How am I planning on spending my time? Not how you actually spend your time. So the time log has been really, really important. And whether doing it with individuals, when people keep logs of how they actually spend their time over 5 to 10 business days, they find that their usage is very different than they might have thought it was. Does it make sense that maybe some activities, like if I really hate filling in travel claims, if that's the bane of my existence, when I fill in travel claims, because it's frustrating, I may overestimate how much time I spend on it because it's an activity I don't like. And you see this universally. If you just ask someone how much time you think you spend a week on X, they'll give you a number. And if it's something that they love, they're probably not getting as much time on it as they want, according to their estimate. Or if it's something they hate, they'll probably overestimate it. We worked with a group of judges once, and looked at how they logged how they spent their time. We collected all their time together and analyzed it as a group. And they going in there, one of their complaints was, we're spending about 2 hours a day doing data entry in this new system of yours, and we think that's not a good use of judge time. And when they actually logged their time, that 2 hours was closer to 5 to 10 minutes a day, because it was something that they didn't like. So it felt a lot worse than it actually was. So keeping a log is actually really, really useful. So I like to keep it in 15-minute increments, and then stop yourself, put a reminder during your day, fill it in mid-morning, fill it in at lunchtime, fill it in mid-afternoon, and fill it in once at the end of the day. Just keep it up to date, because the longer you go from when you spend your time, the more likely your biases, and you'll have estimates that are not all that accurate. So let's jump into the topic. So we've worked with many leaders. The leadership version of the one-day program that we help people go through. Half the people that graduate in the 60, 90 days afterward, they're saying, yeah, I'm freed up at least 10 hours a week. So that's like 2 hours a day of freeing up time at the executive level. And, between 5 and 10 hours for people that aren't executives, maybe middle management or individual contributors. So let's take a look at the phenomenon, what we learned from these time logs. First of all, the cost of being busy. This will be a review for many of you, but whoa, that scary tiger. What happens when we're too busy? We get stressed out. Fight, flight, or freeze. When we're stressed, we produce cortisol and adrenaline, which are really great for outrunning that tiger, but they're not very good for productivity when we're trying to do deep thinking knowledge work. When we get stressed, our workload's too great, prefrontal cortex gets shut off. That's where we do a lot of the executive thinking. And it would be funny if it weren't so terrible. The only executive function that's really unaffected when we're stressed out, producing cortisol and adrenaline, is the list making function, which kind of explains why when you've got a 7-page to-do list, you're really good at sorting it and color coding it. But getting started on that first task is really, really hard to do. Why? Because we actually lose points of IQ when we're stressed out. And then we start making mistakes that we would never make if we weren't quite as stressed out. So I said my name was Mark with a C. I guess there was a big lineup at the coffee shop. And then, in terms of your own work, as people who are leading transformations, have you ever noticed people are like, no, you just try this, and it'll save you, 5 hours a week. I'm too busy to try that. I'm sorry. It's like I'm too busy mopping the floor to turn off the faucet that is causing the sink to overfill. So that's a real challenge. So when we get too busy, there's all these sort of symptoms that we see. Now, from working with these people over the years that have freed up the 5 to 10 hours a week of their time, how did they do it? What are some things that we can learn from the analysis they did of their time logs, and what are some of the things that the most successful people did? I'm going to share that with you now. So one of the first things to think about, we teach this in the course, is boundaries. It's kind of like I judge other people on their behavior, but I judge myself on my intentions. That's pretty common. The humans do that. But I've heard people say, nobody's respecting my work-life boundaries. No one's respecting the boundaries that I set at work. And then I asked, can you tell me what your boundaries are? Or have you shared those with others? And often they haven't. So I think it's really fundamental to start with, what are the boundaries? What are our kind of no-fly zones? Those things that really are our boundaries. And we may not be able to respect them all the time, but if we don't at least write them down, then it's going to be difficult to respect them. And we're just going to be in this repetitive cycle of always being too busy. So here's a question. Here's something that you might want to think about doing. What are your 5 work-life boundaries? Maybe you know what they are. Have you ever written them down? And I bet if you haven't written them down, maybe you haven't communicated them all that well. So there's an exercise we do in the course. Like, let's make what are your 5 work-life boundaries? Like, some of mine are, and I'm by and large able to maintain them because I've written them down and they're clear to me, and they were. I just moved my desk, so they're not behind my desk now, but on the wall. But basically, my boundaries are: I will always have, if I'm in town, I will always have breakfast with my family. I'll make them breakfast. I'll make my daughter's lunch. So for me, that's sacred. I'm not going to sacrifice that if I'm working from home that day. And a lot of my work I do remotely. So that's one. Another is that I finish by 4:30. and I walk the dog, and that I unwind, and then I make dinner after. For me, that 4:30 thing is really a boundary for me. But I've written those things down, and it's hard to respect them if we haven't written them down. So also, those two bullets below on the screen that I'm sharing are kind of like, if you did respect your work-life boundaries, what would the benefit be? What would you do more of, or what would you do less of, to kind of illustrate that what's in it for me sort of thing. So I really encourage you to write down what are your work-life boundaries, because other people are not going to respect them if you're not even clear on what they are. So other boundaries you might want to think about. Where do people spend a lot of time? How many hours a week do you spend in meetings? So type in the chat, how many hours a week do you believe you spend in meetings? You can go on, you have Enterprise Copilot, you can ask, hey, Copilot, how many hours did I spend in meetings? Or did I plan to spend in meetings in the last 3 weeks? How many hours per week? So how many hours a week? When I talk to executives, it tends to be, the number seems to be higher the higher you go in the organization. But when we talk to people who are in senior executive roles, they tend to spend 25 to 30, 35 hours a week in meetings. Well, if that's where they're spending all their time, then maybe meetings is a promising place to look for where the opportunities might be for them to free up their time. So time in meetings. How much time do we spend on email? If we're spending 2 hours a day on email, then maybe we might want to look at how we treat email. So thinking about where are those places where I seem to spend a lot of time, and would it be useful to kind of create some internal rules. I won't always be able to follow them, but at least they're guidelines I want to use as a North Star. And the reason that email and meetings, I put them on the screen here, is that effectively when we if we don't have boundaries on how much time we spend on email and meetings, those are things where other people are setting your agenda. So you lose track, you lose control of what you're doing. So you have a plan for the day. Email can set you off that track, which can be a real challenge. And meetings are, if they're not well run, someone else is spending your time for you. So I really encourage you to look under these two things. We'll look into meetings a bit later. So certain types of boundaries that you might want to think about when we multitask. I'm not going to go through this again, but when we have too many tasks, too much work on our plate, we try to multitask, but we actually switch tasks. We go back and forth and back and forth. And so in an exercise, we ask you in the first round, let's simulate what happens when we don't have a huge pile of work, and write the sentence multitasking each time, and then the numbers 1 to 20, and there's a stopwatch on the corner. Write down how long it took you to do that. Write the sentence and then the numbers. When we get really busy, we tend to switch tasks, which is more like writing a letter number. People take 50% to 100% longer doing it the switchy way, which is what happens when we get really, really busy. So if you find that in your day, you're constantly switching between tasks, there's a real cost to that. So Jerry Weinberg, the computer scientist, I've shown this earlier today, so I won't spend a ton of time on it, but he got a group of coders in the room and said, okay, you got one assignment, just focus on that. They're spending 100% of their capacity on that. As soon as they get 2, they're spending 40% on each of the 2 assignments. When you say they're both important and they're switching, they're spending 20% of their capacity on the switching. And then when the coders had 5, they're spending the vast majority of their time on the active switching. The work slows down and the tax on slow work kicks in. So this is a real serious thing. What can you do about it? Well, number 1 is reduce the amount of work that you have to do. But number 2, I'd suggest anybody raise your hand if you use some form of a Kanban system for your own workload. And there's a book called Personal Kanban, and it's a website as well, where you can take advantage of the benefits of this kind of lean tool. And basically, it's sort of what I won't go deep into it. We could spend an hour on this if you wanted. Principle 1, make all your work visible. Not ready to start, to do, ready to begin, doing what I'm actively working on, and then what I've finished this week. So make all your work visible to yourself so you can manage it, but also to your boss. Because if your boss sees, so if this were in this week here, I had a monster week. This was Friday I took this photo. I got all those tasks done, but if I had 60 items under to do, and I had my one-on-one weekly with my boss, then we'd probably have if this was to do was like just completely full of tasks, then we'd probably have a good conversation about prioritization or about splitting my workload amongst various people. So principle 1, make all your work visible, not just to yourself, but to your boss as well, even to your team if you have a team that you work with, so you can balance the work amongst each other, amongst the whole team. Next is optimize how many things you're actively working on. So the more we switch, the more of our capacity is going to be lost to switching. So for me, 2 big tasks, which are like half hour, 45-minute or longer, I need to get deep into a state of flow. That works for me. And 3 small things like 5-minute tasks, write an email that's going to be a bit of complexity to it. I like to split them between the 2. And the reason I don't have just one thing I work on at once is that I'm working on this and then I realize I need some help from someone. While I reach out for help, I'm going to need to switch to something, but at least I'm going to have been intentional about what I'm going to switch to. Because if I don't have an intentional thing to switch to, I'm going to go to email and now someone else has got control of my day. So that's a real problem. Create that visual signal like the empty box. When there's an empty box, it means I can pull a new task in. So pull tasks in only when we have capacity, pardon me, and a visual cue or signal that keeps us working with the habit, even when we get busy. Because when we're most busy, that we're most inclined to do the switch tasking and lose the most amount of productivity. So that's a lo-fi version that's in a little workplace, and they're tiny little sticky notes. They're only like this big. And then you might ask, well, what about, can I use it? Can I do this virtually? Well, Microsoft Planner, if you're here on Teams and you use Teams in your organization, then you can create your own Kanban board in Planner. The nice thing about it is that it actually shows you when you're late on something and can send you prompts. It's integrated with your calendar, and you can do this across Teams. The only downside of doing this purely virtually is that you have to click on this stuff to see it. You have to click on this stuff to see it, and if you don't click, you're not going to see it, so you're not going to use it. So eventually, you might abandon the habit. Helen, that's a great point. Teams and Slack chats are a bigger culprit even than email, right? So if there's something always popping up, we're getting interrupted all the time. So our team, even though we're never in the same place except 3 or 4 times a year for our quarterly retreats, I have banned the chat function. I certainly don't use it. So you want to get a hold of me, you're not going to be able to get me on chat because it's such a distraction. So at a minimum, turn off notifications and decide when in your day you're willing to do your chat messages. So what are some things we can do to reduce switch tasking? Well, Kanban and work in process limits. So having only 2 big things and 3 small at once, that works for me, and that's worked for a lot of people. In fact, in my own practice, I'm usually teaching or I'm working with a group probably 4 days a week, plus I'm running our practice, which is another full-time job. I'm able to do both and still get out of work at 4:30 most days because I've almost eliminated switching from my work. Another thing we can do to create that focus time and get our deep work done is, we're starting a project. Let's get all those dates when I need to do stuff on that project. Let's get that in my calendar first so that the world organizes around those events. So if I don't book that time in my calendar, I'm going to spend a lot of time trying to, not just my calendar, but the people I collaborate with. If those activities aren't in everyone's calendar, then I'm going to be running around scheduling people. And you, as a Lean Six Sigma black belt, might be spending like 2 weeks of a project doing nothing but trying to schedule people into meetings. Whereas if you'd had a work breakdown at the start, you got everything into the calendar, maybe things would organize around those. Also, another thought is just that if you're booking time for your deep work, try to schedule your deep work when you do deep work best. And if you're a morning person, you don't want to schedule your deep work time, your uninterrupted deep work time at 3 p.m. That's not going to work too well for you. In fact, I'm a morning person. I do my best creative stuff in the morning. So to book that time as creative time, get it in my calendar, protect it, that allows me to do that stuff. Whereas if I tried to do it at 3 p.m., it'd probably take me twice the time, and I wouldn't do very well, especially on a Friday afternoon. Good point, Ken, especially on a Friday afternoon. All right, so where else do people from their time logs seem to be spending a lot of time that could be reduced, where they could spend a lot less time? So it's to create clarity and the concept of jobs to be done. There was a professor at Harvard Business School, Professor Emeritus, his name was Clayton Christensen, just passed away a few years ago. If you might have been familiar with his concept or his paradigm of jobs to be done, people hire a product to perform a job for them. And when you make a request of someone to do something for you, or you receive a request for something to be done, someone asks you to do something, and there isn't a clear job to be done, then maybe we want to ask for one. So what is this job to be done concept? It's basically this. A task, a request, a product that you're being asked to create, you are creating that so that somebody can achieve some kind of an outcome. I like what this guy said back in the 60s. People don't want a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole. Is it a drill they want, or do they want the hole? Are there easier, cheaper, faster ways to get to the hole than a drill? Now, if you're me, you probably want another drill, because I seem to collect power drills in my house. I don't know why, but I've got like 5 power drills. I certainly don't need them. But anyways, the point here is, what is the outcome we're trying to create with the request? If we're not clear on the outcome, then we're going to run into some trouble. So this is a spaghetti diagram of a friend of mine who was a commissioner of a uniformed organization. So this was a uniformed organization. My friend, who was the commissioner, he was a lifelong civilian. So, you know, the chevrons that they have on uniforms, or the epaulettes in French, the thing that shows your rank depending on the stripes, he didn't really have a handle on who he was talking to, what level they were, what rank they were. And even though he was wearing a uniform himself for the first time in his life. So he goes to a uniformed organization, and he asks he sees, he's going to a meeting in a uniformed organization. As he walks into the conference room, he sees a poster on the wall. And that poster was basically a legend that showed you what all the different stripes meant on shoulders. So I think if it was 3 stripes, you're a sergeant, 2, a lieutenant, whatever it is. I don't know. I didn't serve. I should know, but I don't know. Anyways, I thank those who did serve, or who are serving, for their service, but I don't really know what those things mean. Neither did he. So he sees this poster, and he goes to his chief of staff. Hey, chief of staff, I want one of those posters in our place. And this was the back and forth in creating that poster, which was his job to be done, or his job to be done. That what he wanted was a poster that someone that didn't know what those configurations on the shoulder meant would be able to look quickly and understand, you know, what rank someone was from looking at them. Well, this is what happens. He handed it off, and then it gets handed off from person to person to person. This writer, subject matter expert, actually had a publishable version within 2 days. But it went through all this extra back and forth because the different reviewers all had a different idea of what the commissioner wanted, or what they wanted. So when they reviewed it, they would send it back with comments, questions, edits, suggestions based on a completely different job, or a more complex different job. They had all the information already, but it was 172 steps. It took over a year to be completed. It could have been done. It could have been published in 2 days. And then when they added up the salary of all the people giving feedback on it, it was over $20,000 of salary. So making sure we have a really clear job to be done. Like if the commissioner had said, I want a poster that shows what the different chevrons or epaulettes mean, so that a first-time user would understand what that would be, what the different configurations would be, just by looking at this poster. That's a very clear job to be done. But the job really shifted as different reviewers reviewed it. And one of the jobs was, oh, let's create a whole new set of chevrons or epaulettes for a different group that's currently not in uniform. And so they got all the scope creep. Very preventable. So the later that we understand what the job to be done is, the later in the sequence of drafts, the more expensive that those drafts are. Because when we make a late change to a product, because we didn't have a clear job to be done in the first place, what we're doing here, it's more expensive because we're undoing work that was done in the earlier drafts. So that causes us a lot of extra effort. So where we're going with this is that if we can create really great clarity at the very beginning of what is the desired outcome of this task? I'm asking you to perform this task so that I can achieve this business outcome. So I'm asking you to write this speech for the director of the agency, so that they can give a speech to convince X, Y, Z group that they should go along with something that we think. That's a very different memo than a memo where it's just for information for our agency director. So we're going to often over-deliver if we don't have a clear job to be done. And the 2 magic words for job to be done are these 2 words, so that. So it is this. I'm going to type this in the chat. This is I'm going to type it in the chat so it's useful. You can apply it. I am asking you to deliver X so that person Y can achieve this job to be done or out. Stories. So basically user stories that you use in software. If you have a really clear outcome in writing prompts in AI, I thank you very much for that, Danielle. That's a great observation. You're going to get that AI is going to do what you want it to, much more likely than if you leave it kind of vague. So there's a lot of people spend a lot of extra time on doing tasks where they don't have a clear so that before they get started, and they spend a lot more effort than they really should. There's lots of examples when we get into custom software, for example, or configuring a CRM system. If you start out with feature shopping, you're going to see a big binder of requirements, as opposed to if you start out with what problems are we trying to solve, then a very clear job to be done for that software. Start with problems like we talked about earlier today. If you start with the problems to be solved, then you're going to have a much thinner set of requirements. And in this particular case the case study that I'm referring to here was a 500-page requirement project down to 111 pages. It went from a 6-year implementation down to 6 months. So there's something magical about being really clear on what is the job to be done. Little pro tip: if you have a clear job to be done, make sure it travels with the work as it goes through a review and approval process, so that the cover page of the memo or whatever it is, here's the job to be done, so that this person can accomplish X. So every reviewer is then forced to align to that job to be done. Otherwise, you'll end up with all that crazy back and forth and preventable stuff. Okay, so clarity of requests, clarity of commitments. So I'm not going to make a commitment unless I have a clear job to be done. I'm going to ask, yes, I will commit if you can give me this detail, but without the detail, I'm going to end up spending more effort than I should. Now, meetings, if you're spending 20 hours a week in meetings, 30 hours a week in meetings, optimizing meetings can be a really, really helpful way of freeing up your time. So now the reality is we don't control all the meetings that we're invited to. The meetings that we can control, yeah, we can create a lot of clarity about what they're about and what's the job to be done of the meeting and so on. But we'll get requests that we don't know and that we can't solve those meetings, but we do have some agency in how we spend our time in meetings. And there's a method behind this that we worked with executive groups. They've cut the number of items coming to their meetings by 50% and sustained it for like 5 years after. So there's a lot we can do on optimizing meetings. More if you own the meetings, less if you don't, but we still have options. Harvard Business Review has a calculator. If you look up HBR meeting calculator, it'll tell you how expensive that meeting is. You just put estimated salaries and it'll calculate how expensive that meeting was. Once you put a price tag on it, you start going, maybe this isn't a very good use of our time. It really kind of gets us thinking a little bit more about the cost of meetings and how we need to improve those. So this there's also having done a whole bunch of research, because we have a whole practice around optimizing meetings and spending less time in meetings, but getting more value out of them, and having meetings where we're not having meetings where we should, and finding asynchronous ways of getting low value things done instead of meetings. There's some research we saw that this Asana company, their lab, when they look at how much savings people find in meetings, 30% of the savings are from eliminating certain types of meetings or certain types of items from certain types of meetings. 70% of the savings tend to come from redesigning having fewer people invited to the meeting, or having parts of the meeting done outside of the meeting. Everyone fills in their feedback on the Miro board before the meeting, and in the meeting, we'll actually process what's on the Miro board. Or tying the frequency of the meeting, how often we have this type of standing meeting, tying it to the velocity of the work or the issues that we're discussing, either doing them more frequently or less frequently, but often they're out of sync. There's an awful lot of savings just around making sure there are just the right people at the meeting, doing stuff before the meeting, preparation before the meeting, and matching the frequency of the meeting to the frequency or the velocity of the work or the issues. So there's a bunch of savings there. But something I'll show you, back to job to be done. This might look like a lot of overhead, but for what would be the agenda item that's in a meeting. But we've got some people we've worked with, some groups we've worked with, actual organizations, agencies. Their default meeting template in Outlook is, here's the name of the item, here's the job to be done. We're going to do this activity so that this person can achieve this outcome or job to be done. Person or group can achieve this outcome or job to be done. Here's what it might look like. The meeting item. Well, we're going to have a meeting to establish the themes of our annual report. Okay, well, what's the job to be done? To discuss and agree on the 2023 annual report themes. So we're going to discuss and agree on what are the themes we're going to cover in our annual report so that the communications department can create a first draft of the annual report that has a chance of being the final draft with minimal back and forth or review loops. So you can see if you have this level of detail, then you're being really clear to people what you need to be, how you would prepare for the meeting, but also, should I have been invited to this meeting? If I can't contribute to this job to be done, then we can create social license for people to say, you know what, I'm not it, you know what, I can't see based on this job to be done how I can contribute. So unless the job to be done changes, I'm going to respectfully decline and work on something else instead because I don't feel I'm able to add value at your meeting. So it's just a way of taking some agency and expressing some accountability to the organizer of the meeting so that we can get out of meetings effectively that we shouldn't have been invited to in the first place. You might say, oh my gosh, that means changing how we do meetings in our whole place. But you know what? If you just bring this level of detail and clarity to your own meetings, then you can start leading by example, and you might see that other people start following along and helping to support you in your mission to reduce the amount of time spent in meetings they shouldn't be in. Craig, can you add to be done by date X as well? Absolutely, you can absolutely add that. So there's a whole full PowerPoint page, very deluxe version that we use in going deeper into this kind of learning and project work to improve meetings. But absolutely put the date in there as well. Okay, so some tips. And this is people have cut their involvement in meetings and thrived in their careers and their processes have thrived as well. If you can't add value, go back, write back, say, I'm tentative at this. Unless you can tell me specifically what kind of value you want me to create, I don't see how I'm going to create value, so I'm going to do X instead. And if you actually say what X is, then often the person that invited you to that meeting will go, yeah, you should probably work on X. That might be more important. So if the purpose is unclear, it's actually going back and asking for that clarification. Some groups have found that they've gone to a default 25-minute meeting or 20-minute meeting instead of 30, and a 50-minute meeting instead of 1 hour. I don't know if you've had experience with that. Some feedback we've gotten is that, yeah, you know what, I actually have time to recharge between my meetings. I actually have time to reset and get ready for the next one. So I'm able to get through my day a lot better. And you find that, if we have a clear job to be done, we can often get to the point a lot more quickly, even with some important human interaction time to develop trust and nurture trust and psychological safety. Also, time boxing agenda items. Instead of saying, hey, here's an hour, here's the 5 things we're going to talk about, what are those 5 things and how much time do we intend to spend on each? If we don't time box it, meetings are like a gas. They just expand to fill the space that they're given. So you'll spend that whole hour. There's no chance you're going to finish early unless it's time boxed, or very little chance. And then the ground rule, compassionate listening and concise speaking, which means listen to understand instead of listening to come up with your rebuttal, and then be concise when you speak. So people that aren't prepared for the topics in the meeting, they tend to take longer, from our observation, to get to the point than if they were prepared. So if there's a clear job to be done, there's a reasonable expectation that they're prepared, and then won't take 10 minutes to describe something that should take only 1 minute if they were prepared. So a few thoughts on meetings, some things that you can do on meetings. Now, another item that seems to be quite useful. Okay, yeah. What about ensuring participants do the pre-reading so we aren't wasting time going over the docs instead of discussing? Jehan, this is a really good question. I don't know if I like Jeff Bezos, but I think he's figured out how to do some things effectively. He actually gave up on getting people to be prepared for meetings. I guess because he keeps such a pace in Amazon, or he kept such a pace in Amazon, that people couldn't prepare for meetings. They just show up, and he was frustrated because they weren't showing up prepared. So what he did, I don't know if I agree with this, but he would add 5 minutes at the start of the meeting for everybody to read a note. There'd be a 1-page note of what would be discussed, written by the organizer. Everybody would read it, and then they all have it fresh in their minds and they discuss after. I think there's a problem to that, which is that before the meeting, if I know before the meeting what that is, then I can consult if I need to consult. Maybe I don't have all the answers and I'm not the right person to have answered that. So I'm on the fence about whether that works or not. But if you have a clear job to be done and you pay people the courtesy of, we'll spend half an hour in this meeting instead of an hour, but what I need from you is 5 minutes to have read this before we get into the meeting. So lots of different strategies to attempt. Okay, something else that is a big saver of time, particularly in developing products and doing review and approval processes. It's this idea of, everybody gives their feedback along the way by email using track changes. And it's a document, a Word document attached to an email. Well, then you're going to run into version control problems. And I'll show you kind of what happens when we do these sequential reviews in a development process. So you're developing a product. This is what it often looks like if you do it traditionally. So I write the thing, my boss agrees, yeah, that's good. Then my boss's boss sends it back with some comments. It goes down like a yo-yo. It goes back up one level higher when we make changes. And then it goes up and down like a yo-yo. It goes up and down like a yo-yo, on and on and on until it goes higher and higher. And then people are so frustrated by the end. No wonder people think you can't get anything done in government, because this work is all being done sequentially, one after the other. And 111 days to approve a decision in a hearing room that was made on the spot. They had all the information. They could have done it directly after. And now this thing takes 111 days. And by the way, by the time we get into day 60, people have forgotten what feedback they put and in the document, and then they end up undoing edits that they put earlier. So you end up with this disaster. This almost like Kafka. If you've ever read Kafka, you know that this is all the bad stuff about government and the futility of trying to get things done in government. But we can get past that. So if you think about it, if it takes 4 weeks to spread 2 hours of effort over 4 weeks where people individually send their track changes back and forth, versus getting together face to face, add 5 minutes to an existing meeting, everyone's read the document, they give their feedback face to face, you make one round of edits and it goes out the door. This is, I've seen this 80–90% faster than this model with half the effort or less. When we actually get together face to face at the right time, in the right processes or the right parts of the right processes, when it makes sense to do something face to face. The benefit of email, though, and why is that we get to stay on our islands. Okay, we don't have to actually talk to humans. Well, that's great. Maybe we don't want to talk to our enemies from another island or silo. The benefit is that we don't have to talk to other people and that we get a paper trail. Hey, that thing blew up. Well, look, see my edit here? I emailed, I said this was a bad idea. So don't give me any trouble. But it's slow, takes a lot of effort. It's prone to misunderstanding, and it basically perpetuates low trust. Why do we lob things by email at each other anyhow? Well, it's often because we don't trust the people from the other silo don't trust us, and we don't trust them. But when we actually do, when we're selective and we say, okay, let's actually get together face to face and we'll do this all in one shot face to face. It's fast, takes less effort. We learn what good looks like for the next time, and it builds trust. So the next time it's even easier. The problem is it doesn't show a paper trail, but we can, put a quick note on the file or send a quick email around after. This is where we landed. This is why we landed there. You have a record of decision. So sometimes it makes a lot of sense. Instead of going back and forth and chasing people and trying to get them to give their feedback, it makes sense to look at a spaghetti diagram of our process and say, okay, where in this process do you see the back and forth? Where are the highways of back and forth in this spaghetti diagram? You could see the SMA and the OID renderer. There was a ton of back and forth between them. In fact, there's a ton of back and forth between the SMA and this CPRD team. And so when you start to see patterns where these different groups, they have a ton of back and forth, asynchronously or by email, when you actually talk to these people and say, look, you're going back and forth like 30 times here or 50 times, wouldn't it make sense just to spend 2 hours face to face? You can have your back and forth, but they take seconds and minutes, not days, weeks, and months, and all the extra effort that comes out of these types of processes. So what I'd encourage you to do is think about it just really practically. Where does it make sense to do something face to face? And typically it would be at the tasking. Here's the request. Let's make sure we're all on the same page. Tasking. Let's all be on the same page. What good looks like. Definition of done. Where else might it make sense? Well, let's get a bullet point outline of whatever it is we're creating, and let's get together face to face. Do we agree on the logic of that? And now, once we've gone past that checkpoint, then we'll have a face to face to review a pretty good quality first draft that'll be on target because we have a clear job to be done. These are places where it makes a lot of sense and can pull you out of a lot of extra interaction and back and forth that really doesn't add any value, and it's preventing you from getting a lot of things done. But if you're at my little talk earlier today on lean strategic planning, and how we can go from like 22 priorities down to just 2, I'm not going to repeat that whole talk here, but I'll just show you a few highlights. There are things that we can do to tighten up our priorities so that each priority, we have fewer priorities, so we're not spending as much effort on these things, and then they're better scoped, they're better defined, so that we can get them done maybe with less effort. So let's take a look at some of these things that we can do to tighten our priorities. Greg McEwen wrote the book Essentialism. The second time I mentioned it today. If you haven't read this, get the audio book for $10 or whatever it is, or get the Kindle, whatever, the electronic version of it for $12. It is worth it. It's basically about how can we say no to the things that we should be saying no to, and how can we say yes and put our must-do, can't-fail priorities ahead of all of the other potential priorities. In the book, Greg McEwen, the author, talks about, we've got, if we have 20 priorities, we only have so much capacity. If we try to do all 20 things at once, we're going to make just a small amount of progress in these different directions. Our benefit, our impact is going to be diffused amongst 20 different things. And if we can instead say, here are our 4 must-do, can't-fail priorities, then we can focus on those, get those done, do those things first, get the benefit of those. And if we state each of these, instead of stating them each as a solution or an initiative, instead state them as problems to solve. And if we state them as problems to solve, then we can rank them. You all know that if we start with problems, you can say, here's what the upstream ones, here's the downstream ones. And we want to be sure that we're addressing the root causes of things, not just the symptoms. So if you choose the right 4, you can find that you've gotten rid of the need for those 16. You can say no to those things. So using root cause thinking and starting with defining our priorities as rewriting them instead of priorities, reverse engineering them to say, what's the problem we're trying to solve? We're going to see that we've got competing priorities trying to save the same problem, competing for resources, actually competing in the direction they're going. And we may even find, once we state something as a problem, to Katie's talk that just preceded us, someone in our jurisdiction maybe has solved that problem before. Maybe we could learn from how they've solved it. So we don't have all that effort anymore. So there's an opportunity to say no more. So actually, just by this is something you can do with your own priorities, your own personal priorities, or your team. After this talk, after the summit, you can get your team together and you could try to categorize your priorities by what's our must-do, can't fail. This is the stuff we absolutely have to put ahead of everything else. This would be stuff like legislated change, or it's a problem that we absolutely must solve, and if we don't solve it, we're going to be in big trouble. Or a breakthrough that if we can take advantage of that breakthrough, we're going to be able to get more mandate delivered with less effort. So what are our must-do, can't fails? We'll put them ahead of all those other things. Should do might address a symptom, but a painful symptom. Could do's like save it for a rainy day, and don't do, actually making these visible, making a don't do list allows us to say, people are going to come back during the year. A year's a long time, 12 months. That thing we said no to, they might come back and skillfully try to pitch it and convince us to do that thing that we said no to. Unless we make these lists visible, they're going to come back, and we're going to find we end up clogging up our pipes with all these different activities that we should probably be saying no to. So I'm not going to go a lot deeper into that. I'm going to leave this stuff at that, because I think there's some energy behind some of these topics and even other topics that you might want to talk about. But what I would suggest in terms of this quick little flyby, what we've learned from these people that have freed up 5 to 10 to 12 hours a week of their time, 3 things that you can do. Number 1, actually this is the 4th, and it comes first. If you have an idea that you got from today that you want to try building into your practice, whether it's from this talk or any of the others, open your calendar right now and book time next week with yourself to actually start implementing. In fact, you can book multiple appointments with yourself. If you don't do that, though, if it's not on your calendar, it's probably not going to get done, or it's a pretty good chance it's not going to get done. So book some time with yourself right now to give yourself a chance to do some of these things. 3 things that I think you could do right away is start your own Kanban board. If you don't have a Kanban, maybe it's out of date, but get your priorities, make them all visible, make your tasks visible, and so you can manage them. Kanban is a great way of reducing switching if you can. But a little pro tip here, and one of the things that really works for me, I sleep so much better now, is that at the end of each day, plan your next day. Set up your board. What are you going to do next day? Because if you don't, what happens? You show up the next day, you open up your email. Now someone else has got control of your day, and now someone else is driving your day. So if you plan your next day before you're in it, then you have a much better chance of executing your plan. Number 1. Number 2 benefit of that one is that your subconscious will work on. You won't feel it, but you'll show up in the morning. You'll have clarity that you didn't have the night before. So your subconscious will have worked. You won't spin your wheels as much. And have your, whatever that first task is, have it ready to go. If you left your computer on, you just put it to sleep, have that first task show up as your the first thing you do on your computer. The second thing is get that deep work into your calendar, and get it in your calendar and defend it. And even if it means going in teams and putting your status to presenting so people leave you alone. I know that's unethical, but it works. Protect tenaciously your deep thinking time. And the third thing is just take a look at the meetings that you're part of. How clear is there a job to be done? And start pushing back when you're able to so that you don't go to those meetings that you shouldn't be at, and that you're getting that hour, you're spending it on real value work instead. These are just a handful of things that we've learned from watching the people that have gone through this course. I'm actually teaching the 1-day version of this with the time log and the time log guide that helps you analyze very specific questions to analyze how you spend your time. September 16, there's a QR code for it. I'm teaching it, so it's way off in the future. But if you want to go to that is something that's in the calendar. So that's the link to it if you want to check it out. So that is my little talk. I'll just see if you have any questions before I do the wrap up of the whole summit. So anybody have any questions they want to ask? Please don't forget to fill in the poll. And also there's Ken put the SurveyMonkey instrument to give us feedback on the summit. And if you're filling in the SurveyMonkey, please add which topics do you want to see next at the next summit. We may even get to you sooner with some free networking events. And are there speakers that you want to hear from next year? You'll hear less from me next year. We were a bit short of people, so I ended up speaking more than I wanted to this year. So, over to you, Danielle. Question, comment?
Yeah, I do. All of this is great information. I see that you block off focus time, but sometimes we have to, I think the expression is swallow the frog or eat the frog, do the work that we don't want to do. And yep. I'm a person who avoids the frog a lot.
Yeah.
When do you recommend that we tackle that work that just seems, and half the time when I don't tackle it, and then when I finally do, it only really takes me a lot less time than I actually thought it was going to take, but it seems daunting or I procrastinate it. How do you recommend people get those productivity points into their day?
Okay, so can I just answer that with a video for you to watch?
Sure.
If you haven't seen this video, you absolutely must. Inside the Mind of a Master Procrastinator. This guy, he talks about how creatively he's procrastinated. You just got to watch the video. It's 10 minutes. It's worth it. It's just that if we keep kicking these important things down the road, kicking these important cans down the road, we're going to get ourselves into trouble. We're going to miss some really big opportunities. It's one of the funniest TED Talks I've ever seen. And it is also one of the most powerful and impactful things. What I ended up doing, Danielle, what worked for me, was I put a big sticky note behind my computer, and it said future me. And it said, okay, am I procrastinating on this thing? Am I being unkind to future Craig because I'm not doing this thing that I should be doing now? Am I just going to make my evening more busy and not spend time with my wife and daughter and our dog? And it really has been quite helpful. But please look at that video.
Thanks.
It is absolutely brilliant. And people don't want to talk about procrastination. I'm a master at it myself. So ask the team.